She was standing in the kitchen, dressed in a soft pink apron with frills. Her long hair, which usually felt her shoulders, swiftly gathered and pinned up high. I was watching her from behind. "My name is Kenneth." "Hey, Jane, where did you put that?" I was feeling a bit under the weather since the day before, and was looking for my prescription record book before heading to the doctor's, rummaging through the drawers. It wasn't anything serious, but after crossing 60, even a slight indisposition makes you anxious. So I was looking for the prescription record, but couldn't find it and unintentionally called out for my wife, Jane. And then, midway, it struck me. Jane is no longer here. My wife had passed away a year ago. As I made a wry smile, wondering if I was losing my mind, our pet cat Nettie looked up at me curiously from my feet. "Nettie, you're back." When I spoke to her, Nettie responded with a meow. We did not have children. Perhaps for that reason, Jane doted on Nettie as if she was our own child. Nettie was originally a stray cat, and we found her entangled in the bird net at our garbage collection point. Perhaps because of her stray past, Nettie loved to go outdoors. So even after we took her in, we let her roam freely. "Where did Mama keep the prescription record book?" Nettie ignored me, placing her left front paw on my right foot. I closed the drawer I was looking in and opened the one below it. The prescription record was not there either. Instead, there were travel brochures. "Next time, take me with you. You've retired now, and you have some free time. Take me with you." Jane asked me to take her to a quaint, rustic hot spring inn, saying that it had beautiful pink moss nearby and she would love to visit it in May when the flowers would be in full bloom. "Okay, I got it, I'll take you," I answered, and she clapped her hands in joy. But just when we were about to go, last April, Jane suddenly collapsed due to a subarachnoid hemorrhage and passed away 10 days later in the hospital. She was 58. As I was lost in thought, spreading out the travel brochure on the dining table, Nettie jumped onto the table and lay down on the brochure. Nettie's trying to look at that." Nettie, still laying down, started purring. "He's about 10 years old. Mid-50s and human years. I hope you live a long life." Nettie rolled onto her back to show me her belly. Half a month after the first anniversary of Jane's death, I planned a 2-night, 3-day trip to the hot spring inn Jane had always wanted to go to. I called the travel agency in the brochure, and they arranged the inn and round-trip train tickets. While I would be away, I decided to hire a housekeeper, but specifically, a pet sitter for Nettie. I searched online and found a pet sitter who ran her business not too far from my home. As I would be giving my house keys to a stranger, it was necessary to meet her beforehand. "Hello, I'm Nova Garcia, the pet sitter." A few days after I made the call, a woman with shoulder-length black hair came flying in on a bicycle with a basket in front. She was huffing and puffing, her cheeks dimpling as she smiled at me at the entrance. She looked about 55 or 56. As I ushered her into the living room and we exchanged greetings, there was a scratching sound at the living room door. The door opened slightly, and Nettie walked in. "This is the one. It would be great if you could close the door when she opens it." As I got up to close the door, she chuckled. "What's her name?" "It's Nettie, she's a girl." "Oh, I see." She leaned forward to look at Nettie and extended her index finger. In response, Nettie walked up to her, sniffed her finger, and then rubbed her head against the back of her hand. It's unusual for Nettie." "What do you mean?" she asked as she stroked Nettie's head. I told her that Nettie never warmed up to any woman other than my late wife, nor did she even approach them. My late wife used to say that Nettie was jealous, thinking I was having an affair. Oh, so Nettie, do you think I'm not worth being jealous of because I'm just a woman like this? As she and I exchanged smiles, Nettie passed under the chair where she was sitting and curled up under the couch by the window. That spot was Nettie's favorite. It was where my wife Jane used to sit, often taking naps with Nettie on her lap. Feeling reassured that I could leave Nettie in her care, I proceeded with my plan and set off on my journey to the hot spring inn. Looking out the train window at the passing scenery, I wondered how many years it had been since I'd last taken an overnight trip. Since then, 3 years, or was it 5 years ago? I flipped open my flip phone and spoke inwardly to the picture of Jane I had set as my wallpaper. You see that? There's a line. Let's join in. They say the noodles here are delicious. That was on our way back from a 2-day trip to a hot spring in Lake Tahoe, which I drove to. From the moment we left the inn that morning, Jane was excited, constantly pointing out noodle shops. The more excited my wife got, the more my mood plummeted. To make matters worse, the roads were congested, and I grew grumpy for no reason. So, we're stuck in traffic, and now we have to stand in line here. No thanks. If you want to eat it, go eat by yourself. I'll wait in the car. It was like a childish quarrel. Fine. If you don't want to eat, then I won't. Eating alone isn't fun at all. We didn't say a word to each other until we got home. I was wrong back then. In the evening, I arrived at the hot spring inn I had reserved. That day, I soaked in the hot spring and ate the lavish dinner served by the inn. It wasn't as good as I expected. It's true, eating alone isn't fun. The next day, I went to see the lawn cherry blossoms that Jane had wanted to see. Red, white, pink, purple. The entire hillside was covered with beautiful lawn cherry blossoms. It was breathtakingly beautiful. I opened my phone and showed it to Jane in the picture. I felt as though I had finally accomplished something important, something I had left undone. The little over 30 years I spent with you, they flew by, and now it's going to be a long time. The day after, I finished my journey and returned home. I arrived at my house just after 4 p.m. Just then, the pet sitter Nova was there to feed Nettie, and they both greeted me. She returned the key to my house, stepped down to the entrance floor, and put on her shoes. Take care, Nettie. She called out to Nettie, who was in the shadow of the showbox next to the entrance. I remembered the souvenir I had bought for her on my trip and said, "Wait a minute," and brought the paper bag with the souvenir from the living room where I had left my travel bag. She was very modest. "Please accept this. Thanks to you, I could travel with peace of mind." Is that so? Then, without any further ado, as we were doing this, Nettie descended to the entrance floor, ran ahead to the front door. "Do you want to go out to see Nova off? Shall we go to the gate then?" I put on my shoes and opened the door. Nettie was the first one out. Then her, and finally, me. I watched her ride home on her bike with Nettie, who was rubbing herself against the hem of my trousers. When I asked her how Nettie was doing while I was away immediately after I got back from my trip, she happily told me. When I came to feed her, Nettie was waiting for me, and she came to greet me at the door. However, the moment it was just the two of us, things changed. Sometimes, Nettie would get food from some cat lover when we were out, something that had been happening for a while. One evening, as I was watching the evening news on TV, I heard Nettie meowing from the kitchen. "Welcome back, I'm about to feed you." As I called out to her and walked to the kitchen, I served her food from a can on a plate, where she was sitting quietly. Yet, Nettie would just sniff the food with her nose up close and lick her paw pads without taking a bite, all the while stroking around her mouth, ears, and forehead. "Did you get fed somewhere again?" Nettie didn't respond but kept on stroking her face passionately. Then one evening, even when it was usually time for her to be home, there was no sign of Nettie coming back. I became anxious, wondering if she had had an accident, and went out to the gate calling for Nettie. But there was no response. Then my cell phone rang. "This is your pet sitter, Nova. Kenneth, Nettie is here at my place." "Nettie, at your place?" I explained that I was worried because Nettie was late coming home and had been searching for her outside the house. And I told her that I would pick up Nettie immediately. "It's okay, I'll bring Nettie over," she replied. After about 10 minutes of waiting at the gate, she arrived, waving from her bicycle. Nettie was comfortably lounging in the front basket of her bike. As I waved back at her, I was curious about Nettie. Nettie was usually afraid of women other than my wife, Jane. I invited her to my house for a cup of tea as a token of thanks, and she agreed to stay for a while. When I tried to lift Nettie out of the bicycle basket, she jumped out of my arms and quickly headed to the front door to wait for it to be opened. Even after entering the house, Nettie led us to the living room and curled up on the sofa where my wife often napped, with her front legs neatly aligned and her chin resting on them. I think it was after 5 o'clock. I was about to go shopping when I heard a cat meowing from the garden, she said. When she stretched her neck to see, she said, Nettie was in her front yard. I was so surprised. "Nettie, isn't it Nettie?" I called out. Then, Nettie went towards her, purring and rubbing her body against her legs. After talking about Nettie, we shared our own stories. She divorced about 10 years ago and was living alone in the house her late parents left her. She was living on the rental income from the apartments next to her house. She was doing pet sitting to earn some extra money because she had free time. I told her about losing my wife to a subarachnoid hemorrhage a year ago. I was completely dependent on my wife for household chores, and I can't cook at all, I said. How do you manage your meals every day? Well, you can have everything nowadays. I make do with ready-to-eat food from supermarkets and convenience stores. As I said that, she seemed to be considering something. Nettie seemed to be listening to our conversation while purring. Since that day, she started bringing me homemade meals packed in Tupperware whenever she could. Look, it's easier and more fun for me to cook for two than just for one, she would say. I thanked her and accepted her kindness. But there was one thing. Every time she brought me her homemade food, there was always "This is a treat for Nettie." I suddenly thought, am I being treated like Nettie? Am I just being fed like a cat? This continued for a month or so. Feeling guilty for always receiving her homemade meals, I occasionally bought fruits or some fancy sweets from the supermarket and gave them to her. Before we knew it, it was summer and the holiday was approaching. Since the beginning of August, Nettie had been coming home late again. That day, despite the thick rain clouds hanging in the sky since morning, a cool breeze made it a relatively comfortable day. Frustrated with Nettie not coming home even in the evening, I decided to visit her house for the first time, fearing the worst. That pesky Nettie, as I thought, she's here. Standing at the gate, my eyes wandered towards her front yard. There, seated on the porch, Nettie was contentedly on her lap. Just as I was about to press the doorbell, Nettie raised her head and turned to face me. Recognizing me, Nettie hopped off her lap, stretched her front paws out, made a big yawn, and then stood upright, arching her back and yawning again. After that, she slowly headed my way. Nova also noticed me. "Oh, Kenneth," scratching my head, I took a bow. Suddenly, large drops of rain started to fall. Nettie, instantly changing direction, rushed into the house. "Kenneth, it's raining. Please come inside." As she said, I opened the gate and ran under the eaves at the front door. The rain became a downpour, showing no sign of stopping anytime soon. She invited me to have dinner with her. Well then, I might be imposing, but I would be delighted to accept your kind offer. As I responded, she smiled sweetly and donned a light pink frilly apron. "Is this the kind of apron you'd find at some cafe?" Noticing my wide-eyed surprise, she bashfully explained that the apron was a birthday gift from a friend many years ago. "I didn't usually wear this sort of thing, so it's been put away for a long time. My regular apron has worn out. I live alone, nobody will see, and I didn't want to buy a new one, so I just dug this one out." With that, she turned back towards the kitchen, quickly tying up her long hair that had been down to her shoulders. From behind, I couldn't help but feel my heart skip a beat at the sight of her exposed nape. In the next moment, she let out a small gasp. Nettie had jumped onto the ties of her newly tied apron, undoing them. "Oh, you, such a cheeky girl." I faced her across the dining table. The dinner we shared was delicious. No, it wasn't just the two of us. Right next to us, Nettie was also having her meal. While eating, Nettie let out a series of satisfied purrs. Both of us turned our eyes and ears towards Nettie. And it sounded like Nettie was saying, "Delicious," while eating. We looked at each other and laughed. Nettie hadn't visited her house in quite a while, she explained. She was enjoying a quiet breeze while reading a book on the porch, mindful of the looming rain clouds. That's when Nettie made a casual appearance. Politely sitting down, as if to say, "Please let me stay here," she hopped onto her lap. After the rain stopped, I brought Nettie home. I went straight to the front of the home altar. There were some things I really wanted to report to my late wife, Jane. That I had dinner at Nova's place. How seeing the nape of her neck had set my heart racing. And most importantly, that Nettie had grown fond of her. While whispering such things in my heart and joining my hands in prayer in front of the altar, Nettie jumped onto my lap, rubbing her body against me and purring. When I looked at Nettie on my lap, she was looking up at my face. And she blinked slowly and quietly. I blinked back at her. And it seemed as if Nettie smiled. I looked at Nettie's face and the photo of my deceased wife, Jane, on the home altar. She's not a bad person. I felt as if I could hear Jane's voice just then. It had been 4 years since I last saw my ex-wife. Unchanged and beautiful as ever, she appeared in the cafe. Upon taking her seat, she fixed her gaze on me and revealed why she'd asked to see me today. I was at a loss for words. After all, I hadn't even expected that this could happen. "Please, we might still have a chance. Won't you give it another try?" Her words, suggesting we still might have time, resonated deep within me. Could we really make it in time? I had no idea if trying again would work. However, I'd always regretted leaving my ex-wife, not being able to empathize with her feelings. I knew I'd certainly regret it if I pushed her away now. All right, let's give it a shot. And so, the time started ticking again for the two of us. My name is Jeff Johnson. I'm 28 years old. I've been working at a securities firm since graduating from college. This job, where big money moves, initially the pressure was so great that I thought about quitting many times. But I kept questioning myself, wondering if I was only capable of this much, and somehow managed to keep going. Now, at the age of 28, I've become what they call an ace in the firm. Once I've made it this far, my ambition for my job kept growing. I wanted to improve my performance further and get promoted. I wanted to prove to everyone that I'm capable of more than they see. Even when I'm not at work, I've found myself thinking about it. The time I've spent with my wife, whom I married at 26, named Hannah, was gradually decreasing. Hannah, a stay-at-home wife, handled all household chores perfectly, providing well-balanced meals. She was a great wife. Since we were childhood friends, we've been together for more than 20 years now. Her father was a benefactor in my life. Hannah's father used to teach children martial arts at a local gym. I had been attending it since I was in elementary school. My own father passed away when I was in the 3rd grade. My parents were estranged from our relatives, so it was just my mom and me after that. But my mom was often bedridden due to the shock of losing my father. I was still a child, and without any relatives to turn to, I didn't know what to do and felt completely lost. It was then that Hannah's father, a man named George, came to our rescue. George had lost his wife and was raising Hannah on his own. Perhaps it was because of that, he understood how my mother, who had just become a single parent, might be feeling. He explained this to me with a kind voice. He really helped us out by calling the insurance company, my mother's employer, and the people at the municipal office, even asking them to help with some administrative procedures. There were also times when he took me in and let me stay over at his place. Thanks to George stepping in, my mother was able to rest. She gradually recovered. It was around that time. That's when Hannah stopped being just the daughter of the instructor. Hannah and George became like family to me. When I, now an adult, went to George to tell him that I wanted to marry Hannah, he was overjoyed. "Jeff, I've always considered you as a son. I'm so happy to know that you'll truly be my son now." I think I'll never forget how he told me this with a smile. I was supposed to have had a happy marriage, blessed by my benefactor, but I ended up divorcing Hannah. It was all my fault. Hannah was always concerned about my health and tried to cherish our time together. "Are you all right? Shouldn't you take a break? How about we go to a spa together next time? Let's relax." I thought we were kind childhood friends when we first got married, but I somehow came to find it bothersome to have Hannah worry about me. My desire to succeed at work was so strong that I was taking her kindness for granted. "Shut up. You wouldn't understand. This is a crucial time for me. Don't bother me." I kept saying such things. Hannah might have looked hurt, but I wouldn't have noticed. It had been a long time since I had actually looked at Hannah, as I was always throwing harsh words at her. Then one day, Hannah said to me, "I want to spend this weekend together. It's an important day. Please come home early. I have something to talk about Dad. Could I tell you in detail then?" "Oh, got it. I'll come home early." At that moment, I simply responded, "Got it," without confirming what she meant by important day or asking about what happened to George. I suppose I had developed a bad habit of mindlessly responding to Hannah's words. So, as I often did, I casually replied to Hannah, and sure enough, I forgot my promise to come home early and ended up working overtime on the weekend. The only message I sent to Hannah was, "Working late. Don't need dinner." I didn't even mention the promise because I had completely forgotten about it. Hannah usually replies right away, but not this time. But I didn't care about that either. I was solely focused on the work in front of me. When I returned home after midnight, Hannah was already gone. There was a short note and completed divorce papers left behind. The note read, "I wanted more family time. But your important thing is your job. Good luck with your work. Please take care of your health. Reading it, I finally remembered the promise I made with Hannah. Glancing at the calendar, I noticed it was marked as my birthday. The important day for Hannah was neither our anniversary or Hannah's birthday. It was my birthday that Hannah considered an important day. Hannah's birthday was a month before mine, but I don't remember ever celebrating it. Hannah was planning to celebrate the birthday of a husband who couldn't even remember his wife's birthday. Looking around the house, Hannah's belongings were gone. I didn't think she could move everything out in a single day. Perhaps Hannah was expecting me not to keep the promise and had been gradually moving her things out. But I hadn't even noticed that Hannah's belongings were starting to disappear from the house. By the time I noticed, Hannah and her things were already gone. Hannah didn't ask for alimony. It must have been a tough marriage for her. I believe she had the right to ask for it. But Hannah didn't demand anything from me. Instead, she left the house, leaving behind a note with words of concern for me. I couldn't chase after Hannah. I filled out the divorce papers and submitted them the next day. In the end, I couldn't listen to what George wanted to say, the talk Hannah had mentioned. I told George about the divorce over the phone. I didn't have the courage to face him. I apologized for not taking care of Hannah. George didn't sound angry or sad. He simply said, "I understand." The call ended there, and we haven't spoken since. Because of my selfish actions, I lost both my wife and benefactor in an instant. I was a wreck after the divorce. I had no motivation, started missing work, and eventually quit my job. I was left with nothing, as my life had been all about work. I tried getting jobs a few times, but I'd always end up missing work and wouldn't last long. Now, I'm just getting by with day labor. I've been living like this for 4 years. I've turned 32. Here I am now, waiting for Hannah at a coffee shop. I received a call from Hannah a few days ago. "There's someone I want you to meet." I know you must be thinking, what is she, the one who gave the divorce papers, saying but. No, I'm the one to blame for the divorce. Hannah, you did nothing wrong. No, that's not true. Could you just meet once? There's someone I really want you to meet. Someone you want to meet. Someone I know. You know him, but also you don't. I didn't understand what she meant, but I decided to meet him. I've always wanted to apologize to Hannah directly. This might be my last chance. The old-fashioned door chime of the coffee shop rang. As I turned towards the entrance, there were Hannah and her father, George. When I gave a small wave as a sign, Hannah came over. The person she wanted me to meet was George. I was curious about what kind of person he would be, as she said, "You know them, but also, you don't." Hannah still looked as beautiful as ever. It was a stark contrast to how worn out I'd become in the past 4 years. "Jeff, it's been a while. You look like you've lost some weight. Is work keeping you busy?" "No, I quit my old job." "What?" "Oh, I see." Hearing that I had quit my job, Hannah kindly did not ask me for details, as if she had guessed what was going on. "Miss, who is this gentleman over here?" For a moment, I didn't understand who was speaking. The only person in front of me was George. But for him to refer to Hannah as Miss and me as "who is this gentleman?" Even though we've known each other since we were kids, there's no way he would forget. He is not the kind of person who goes around deliberately saying things the wrong way. That's why I was so puzzled, staring at Hannah. Then, looking down with a sad expression, Hannah said, "My dad, you see, he has dementia." Dementia. I'd heard of it, of course, but I didn't fully comprehend it until then. But I felt something was off about George. He had a constant smile on his face. He was always a cheerful person, but he used to have a dignified presence. Now, he just looks like a jolly old man, always grinning. Actually, even before the divorce, I had been noticing that he was becoming more forgetful. After the divorce, signs of dementia began to emerge gradually. Now, there are times when he can't recognize me as he used to, Hannah revealed, with a sigh. So, there were signs before the divorce too. I couldn't hide my shock at the change in my benefactor. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to, but you were always so busy with work. I thought we could talk about it leisurely at a birthday celebration or something. Right, it was my fault that we didn't have time to talk. I'm sorry, you had to move out your stuff bit by bit, didn't you? Yes, I'm sorry. I couldn't fully trust you. I was moving my belongings into a storage container bit by bit. I thought I could move back home if you kept your promises, but you didn't. You never came home early, so I moved my stuff from the storage container to a studio apartment after the divorce. Perhaps Hannah would still be with me as a family if only I had kept my promises. I felt pathetic for having lost something so precious. I'm truly sorry for those times. After the divorce, I lost my motivation and quit my job. I used to think work was everything. I wasn't really paying attention to you, Hannah. It's okay now. I've also been holding back, not expressing my feelings because I was a housewife. I should have expressed my complaints and demands to you. We used to say anything to each other when we were kids. I wonder when we stopped talking to each other. Hannah's words pierced my heart. We were childhood friends who ended up marrying each other. We had a long-standing relationship. Yet, things still didn't work out. Just because we were childhood friends, just because we were married, I shouldn't have taken communication for granted. I was filled with feelings of regret and remorse. Then, a sudden interruption came. Hannah, Jeff, shall we go to the gym? I've got some candies for you too. George, who had been smiling silently, suddenly suggested. Surprised, Hannah hurriedly explained to me. Dad, you see, his memory fluctuates. He remembers and forgets, but lately, he's been remembering your name, Jeff, and our childhood stories a lot when looking at photo albums. He often gets angry and throws tantrums due to his dementia, but when he remembers you, Jeff, he's very calm. Oh, is that why you wanted me to meet him today? At my words, Hannah nodded. My father's heart is failing. He's been in and out of the hospital a lot. When a vacancy arises, he will be admitted to a hospital specializing in dementia. But then I won't be able to see him as often as I do now. So, just until he goes into the hospital, why don't you talk to him with me? I want to let him enjoy his memories in a peaceful way, while he can remember. I was at a loss for words at Hannah's sudden proposal. But it's Hannah's wish, and more importantly, if it could make George, my benefactor, can be immersed in his memories peacefully, I wanted to do whatever I could. So, what about you, Jeff and Hannah? Are you guys off to play outside again? You two are always full of energy. George, unable to recognize Hannah and me in front of him. But he seemed so happy talking about our childhood. Please, I think we still have time. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused you due to the divorce. I haven't been able to do anything for him. That's why I want to do what I can for my father now. What exactly should I do? Why don't we spend time together again and have tea like this sometimes? Go to the gym. Dad often says he needs to pick up Hannah and Jeff from elementary school, so he might be happy if we take him there. We weren't a good married couple, were we? But we were more like a family when we were kids. I want to recreate those times when the three of us spent time together. I think Dad will remember more if we do that. I want him to enjoy his memories. Hannah sounded very serious. I wonder if I can do it. I failed to cherish Hannah. I'm such a loser. I hope I won't ruin George's memories. That won't happen. Let's try to remember how we felt when we were kids. I'm sure we were considerate of each other. Shall we try again? At Hannah's words, my heart was set. For the next 6 months until a bed became available in the specialized dementia hospital, I spent as much time as I could with Hannah and George. George would suddenly get angry or zone out. But whenever we opened the photo album, or when Hannah and I visited the places from our memories, he was always calm. There were times when he seemed to recognize us, and others when he didn't. But that didn't really matter. George was able to enjoy his memories. That was enough. Hannah and I talked a lot more than when we were married. Now we laugh about how strange it is that we didn't talk this much when we were married. 6 months after I started spending time with George and Hannah, George was admitted to a dementia-specialized hospital out of state, in Arizona. His heart was weak, so there were no options but the hospital outside of our state. We could visit him, but obviously not as frequently as we used to. On the day of his departure, the facility staff came to pick him up in their car. George, not fully grasping the situation, was smiling, while Hannah was in tears. "Dad, take care." Despite her call, George just kept smiling without saying anything. But when he got in the car and the staff rolled down the window, after looking at Hannah and me, George said, "You two take good care of each other." Those were the same words he said to us when we got married. Whether he recognized us or simply remembered the wedding, we couldn't tell, but Hannah and I answered together, "We will," just like we did at the wedding. We waved goodbye until the car carrying George disappeared from sight. A month has passed since George entered the hospital. His condition has been going back and forth. We are planning to visit George together next week. Since then, Hannah and I have been meeting often. We likely share the same feelings of cherishing each other. But that doesn't mean we want to remarry right away. We don't want to repeat the same mistakes. We can be together without getting married. We are searching for a way to stay together while caring for each other. Whether that's as a couple or as a married pair, we are not sure yet, but Hannah seems happier now than when we were married. I want to keep this happiness going as long as possible. An impudent, younger female boss. That was all she was to me. Caught in a sudden downpour, I got a glimpse of her true face. "Do you want to see more?" She provocatively whispers this, looking up at me, and I find myself holding my breath. "Do you want to come to my place?" Upon blurting out these words, her reaction was, "My name is Michael Collins, and I turned 28 this year. Bear with me as I share a little about my background and the path I've walked. I was born as a winner. If I named the company I've worked, everyone would exclaim, 'Oh, that one,' in admiration. I was born as the son of the president of the company. Even though I was the second son, my parents loved me without any favoritism. It was already decided by the time I graduated from elementary school that my older brother would take over my father's business. So, I had to find my own path. Both my parents were passionate about education. I didn't hate studying, and fortunately, I was better than most of my classmates. I realized I was naturally smart, perhaps like my father, around the time I was in high school. A gift I was born with. I never took it for granted. I didn't slack off in my efforts to meet my parents' expectations. There was a part of me that felt that I was slightly better. My brother was a kind person, but I considered him an ordinary man. His only exceptional quality was his kindness. My mother said, "That's an important thing," but I was dissatisfied with my brother. My brother, who had all the expectations of our parents and grandparents on his shoulders and was destined to take over the company, even though he was less capable than me. Back then, I must have been an insufferable, arrogant man. Looking back now, it was embarrassing. I reflect on it as the folly of youth. I earnestly wished that someday my parents would recognize my excellence and change their successor. But such a moment never came, and I graduated from university. Because I had such evil intentions, I wasn't very enthusiastic about job hunting. Still, I received job offers from more than 10 companies, including my first choice. While harboring dissatisfaction with the unresolved issue of inheritance, I was about to take my first step as a working adult. And then, I experienced my first setback in life. The company I joined as my first choice was a famous advertising firm. Once I joined, there were plenty of rich kids like me. The existence of me, who had always been in the spotlight, was quickly buried. I was disconcerted by the unfamiliar situation of not being the center of attention. I became increasingly anxious about not being able to control the situation as I had imagined. My inherently arrogant nature got in the way, and I didn't listen to my colleagues' advice, resulting in a disastrous mistake. It took less than 6 months for me to commit a terrible mistake. I can do everything on my own. It was a mistake caused by my arrogant belief. I stared blankly at my colleagues running around to cover for me and my boss apologizing to clients. I was broken from that point. The next day, I submitted my resignation. I never went to work again. I didn't want to interact with people anymore, nor did I want to meet anyone who knew about me. My worried parents arranged for a separate apartment for me, away from our family home. In a way, I was ousted and left my house, taking refuge in a provided apartment. Half a year passed, and I finally started going outside, but I wasn't in the mood for job hunting. I was unemployed. Every day, I focused on living lazily. I decided to live in a way that completely denied my former self. I continued such a lifestyle for a few years. I think I was able to return to society because of a series of small lucky events. The only entertainment for me during an emolite period was movies. There was an art house cinema near my apartment. They showed slightly obscure films and old foreign movies in this small movie theater. At the end of the year, they also had all-night screenings, and it was a good art house cinema deeply rooted in the local community. One day, as I was buying a ticket as usual, there was a recruitment poster for staff at the reception. "Are you hiring staff?" As I received my ticket and asked, I was told they were urgently recruiting due to a sudden vacancy. At that time, I had no idea what kind of work an art house cinema does. They said it's a fun job if you like movies, and my interest was immediately piqued. I decided to apply for this job. The next day, I brought my resume. Immediately, I had an interview with the cinema manager, and I was hired on the spot. Everything went so smoothly, I remember feeling a bit scared. I was worried about what to do if it turned out to be an incredibly harsh company when I returned to my apartment. I was to start work from the day after the interview. I was quite anxious about what kind of job it would be on the first day. It seems that my work was publicity and sales. Publicity work included creating posters and flyers, creating displays within the theater, and exhibits. Outside sales involved purchasing and advertising the films to be screened. The staff was small and everyone was handling multiple tasks. "Hi, I'm Michael Collins. Nice to meet you." The person I bowed my head and greeted, my boss, was a girl who looked like a doll. I suppose I should call her a woman. But she really looked like a little girl. I was surprised again when I heard her age. She is 5 years younger than me. The cinema manager secretly told me that she dropped out of high school and was a part-timer. She seemed to have started working here after working multiple part-time jobs and being asked if she would like to work here. Her efforts after that were said to be tremendous. They also said she originally had good taste, and all the movies she purchased were hits. Now she's a famous super buyer in the industry. She and the cinema manager were in charge of my training. This is how I got a younger boss. A week passed in no time, with a younger girl as my boss. I was made aware of her abilities in this week. The skills I had developed during my student days were of no use. I was racking my brain every day over my incompetence. The cinema manager said, "Take your time to learn," but I had my pride as a man and as someone older. My enthusiasm ended up spinning its wheels and inviting failure. Every time that happened, she called me this. Junker. Junker became my nickname in no time. It wasn't sarcasm. I knew she was calling me that with affection. But for me, who had been going straight on the path to success, being called a Junker was also a humiliation. I'll take a revenge someday. This feeling would invite my next mistake. My boss, Claire, is as beautiful as a doll. She's short with a white complexion, giving her an overall delicate impression. But her inner character is robust. I've understood that painfully well over this past week. Generally, the people in this workplace are all quite quirky. The conversations here are often teetering on the edge of sarcasm. At first, I genuinely thought I had picked the wrong job. But after observing everyone for a while, I realized how naive my thoughts had been. What sounds like insulting banter isn't actually meant as such. And everyone is sincerely committed to their work. As a result, there might be arguments, but they're just temporary. Nobody engages in discussions that outright deny the other's opinions. Even as a newbie, they listen to my opinions and, although with a tinge of sarcasm, give me advice. The pace at which employees grow in a workplace where there's no need to pretend to know everything seemed different. "Michael, have you finished ordering the flyers?" As soon as she returned from the client meeting, Claire threw instructions my way. "It's all good. The submission is done." Not bad for a Junker," Claire said and placed a gift, a cafe latte from a convenience store, on my desk. I guess she remembered that this is the only thing I drink when we are on outside calls. From the other desks, voices of complaint rose. "Why don't we get anything? Don't be a baby. Go and buy it yourself." Even though everyone else is older, Claire is relentless. She's equally tough with the theater manager, making her practically the most powerful person here. I somehow feel a bit spoiled, but the theater manager laughs it off, saying that's just how it is with newbies. I can't always be babied by those younger than me. I pledged to myself, sipping the cafe latte. Sales is part of my job too. One day, I had an outside sales job. Claire was accompanying me. I had gone out with the cinema manager a few times, but this was my first time with Claire, and I was a bit nervous. To get me accustomed to going alone in the future, we visited a few ticket booths and bookstores. It had been sunny since morning, and the weather was nice, but after visiting about 5 places, the sky started to darken. "It might rain. Do you have an umbrella?" "I don't usually carry an umbrella." Claire looked up at the overcast sky with a hint of anxiety. I realized I had never seen her carry an umbrella. I was about to ask why she didn't when suddenly, heavy rain began to pour. A sudden downpour. There's nothing we could do about this sudden heavy rain. Caught in the middle of a crosswalk, we started running. We managed to duck under a store awning and escape from the rain. Though we were soaked in the rain for just a few seconds, we were thoroughly wet from head to toe. I heard Claire click her tongue in annoyance. With a look of irritation, she took out a handkerchief to wipe her wet hair. Her makeup seemed to have smidged a bit from the rain. This sucks. She cursed, kicking my leg in frustration. I'm not the one who made it rain, you know, huh? What? I looked down at Claire, and I felt a sense of discomfort. There was something different about her face. Her makeup was smeared, I think, but there was still something off. Observing closely, I realized what was causing this discomfort. Claire, did you have beauty marks under your eye? She must normally conceal them with foundation or concealer. 3 beauty marks lined up under her left eye. It felt like I had just discovered a secret about Miller, and it gave me a little thrill. Want to see more? She whispered, looking up at me, and my heart skipped a beat. It was pretty sexy. I was smitten by these suddenly revealed beauty marks. I've always had a thing for beauty marks. I'm well aware of it. Unconsciously, I moved a little closer to Claire and looked down at her. Do you want to come to my place? It's not far from here. Upon hearing my words, Claire's face turned bright red. I also started to feel a bit embarrassed. I tried to smooth things over, but before I could say anything, I got a swift kick in the shin. Ouch! Hey, what was that for? Shut up, you're such a yunker, stop talking nonsense. Claire spat out these harsh words, leaving me crouched there in pain as she ran off. The rain hadn't stopped. She'll be soaked by the time she gets home. I hope she doesn't catch a cold. I started to worry. When I returned to the cinema, Claire had apparently gone straight home and wasn't back at the office. The next morning, Claire's attitude was unmistakably cold. She was deliberately avoiding me. She wouldn't look at me, and her greetings were half-hearted. Even when I tried to discuss work, she handed tasks off to other seniors. She was systematically excluding me from her territory. Other staff members started questioning me. Hey, what did you do to her? It made things uncomfortable. During lunch break, I finally caught up with Claire, but she still wouldn't look at me. In a corner of the hallway, out of sight from other staff members, I confronted Claire. Why are you avoiding me? I'm not avoiding you. You're just imagining things, Junker. She glared up at me, and I couldn't help but recall what had happened the day before. As I gently rubbed the area under Claire's left eye with my thumb, the 3 hidden beauty marks reappeared. She glared back at me, not resisting my touch. Suddenly, my memory started to rewind. I had seen these beauty marks before. This was back when I was still a college student. Back then, I was arrogant and unlikable. I thought I was superior and couldn't imagine making a mistake. Both my classes and my social club felt like playtime, and I spent my time there aimlessly. There was a tavern that our club always used. An Italian-style tavern, a little fancy, perfect for wooing girls. That day, we had a mixer, 3 friends and 4 girls. I think most of the girls were interested in me. My buddy noticed it and began to get irked. I think if he's going to get irked, he might as well work on himself, but he doesn't seem to have that kind of ambition. Even worse, he started making passes at the young waitress who brought us our food. The girl, who looked about high school age, was blushing and clearly uncomfortable. Her hair was dyed silver and cut into a pixie style, adorned with several piercings. I thought maybe she was a bit rebellious. Because of her appearance, I assumed she could easily avoid the flirt. But I soon realized that appearances can be deceiving. She was genuinely distressed. Unable to rebuke the customer too harshly, she seemed to lack the experience to handle the situation smoothly. Seeing this, I, who had been trying to charm the doll-like beauty sitting next to me, signaled her with my eyes to hold on for a moment. Hey, enough is enough. Can't you see she's upset? I reached out, grabbing my friend by the collar as he leaned towards the waitress. While he was flailing, I managed to tell the waitress, "Go ahead, get out of here." "Dude, you've crossed a line." I patted my friend on the shoulder, laughing and diffusing the situation. From inside the counter, I could see the waitress bowing repeatedly to me. There were 3 little moles under her eyes. That's right, now I remember. Wait, the waitress, from that Italian bar. At my outcry, Claire gave a sharp click of her tongue. I had frequented that bar many times until I graduated. I must have seen that face countless times. "Aren't you going to marry that doll-like girl?" Claire asked out of the blue. She must be talking about my girlfriend from college. A girl who looks just like Claire now. As I thought about it, I suddenly realized. I can't believe it, it might be my misunderstanding, but... Claire, is that outfit a cosplay? Immediately after, I felt a sharp pain in my chin and groaned. Claire's headbutt had landed right on my chin. I crouched on the spot due to the pain, and Claire stood over me, looking triumphant. "Choose your words carefully, Junker," she declared arrogantly, looking down at me and clicking her tongue. As she walked away, I thought I heard a quiet thanks for back then. "Cinema manager, I have something to ask you." I burst into the cinema manager's office and shouted that. The cinema manager laughed and said, "Oh, you've found out, huh?" According to him, he hired me because Claire wanted him to. Apparently, she asked him to hire me because I was her first love who helped her out, and now I was unemployed and struggling. Apparently, they even timed the job postings for when I was buying a ticket. I have been played by all the staff of this art house cinema. Claire had remembered the girl I was with at the time and tried to dress like her, she explained. It wasn't exactly cosplay, but it wasn't far off. The cinema manager laughed as he told me that Claire had sworn them all to secrecy about her change of appearance and everything else. Everything had been orchestrated by Claire. How roundabout. And yet I thought how endearing she was. The next day, Claire was back to the girl I remembered. It seems her black hair was a wig. Sporting a very short haircut with numerous piercings, slim black pants, and a white t-shirt. If she appeared like this for our reunion, I would have recognized her immediately as Claire. Claire, completely back to her old self, acted as if nothing had happened. During lunch break, I gently ask her as she stuffs a pastry into her mouth at her desk. "So I heard I was your first love. Have you always liked me?" Claire gave me a stern look and clicks her tongue. Then she turned her face away and said, "I hate you now." Caught off guard by her less than sweet response, I find myself saying, "What?" in surprise. Then, Claire, with a mischievous smile, turns her face towards me. "You're a real Junker, you know." Her lobes were slightly red. "Well, I guess I'd better graduate from being a Junker then. Please reconsider once I do." As I pet Claire's head, a headbutt comes flying into my side. Groaning and hunched over in pain, I stay crouched. "You're so cheeky for a Junker." Leaving those words behind, Claire walked out of the office. "But I suppose I can wait." I didn't miss the words she added in a small voice. The day she would stand next to me wearing a wedding dress seemed a long way off. So, what did you think? Subscribing the channel and it gives me the motivation to create more content. See you in the next video.